He looked like a spooky figure from the mountains. His hair was all wild and long past his shoulders, and his clothes were patched up with bits of leather and fabric. But one stormy night, when 6 scared people showed up at his door, talking in a language he didn't get, Silas Ward learned that being alone wasn't the safe hideout he thought. The wind was screaming through the pine trees around his cabin, shaking the wooden shutters he'd made himself. Silas was sitting by his stone fireplace, fixing a ripped boot with careful stitches. It had been 3 years since he'd talked to anyone, 3 years since he picked this faraway valley, miles from any town, to get away from sad memories that hurt him back in the city. A loud knock hit his door like a boom. Silas stopped, his needle stuck in the leather. Nobody ever came up here. The path to his cabin was hard to find, twisting through thick woods and rocky hills that even tough mountain guys would struggle with. He'd built this place to stay hidden, away from the world that took everything from him. The knocking came, again, louder and faster. It sounded like lots of hands banging on the heavy wooden door. Through the storm, he heard voices talking fast in a language that sounded like water running over rocks. They sounded super scared. Silas stood up slowly, his body stiff from years of moving carefully all by himself. He hadn't talked to anyone in so long, he wondered if his voice would even work right. The voices outside got more panicky, louder than the wind. He heard kids crying. He walked to the door super carefully, like someone who'd learned not to trust anyone. His rifle was leaning against the wall nearby, ready to use. But when he put his ear to the door, he heard something that made his heart feel tight with a feeling he'd tried to forget. A woman was begging. Her voice was so desperate, it didn't matter that he couldn't understand her words. She was asking for help, for kindness, for something only he could give in this lonely mountain spot. Silas's hand hovered over the big wooden bar that locked his door. For 3 years, that bar had kept the outside world and all its pain away. Opening it would mean letting people into the safe place he'd worked so hard to build. But that kids crying came through the wind, and the woman's voice sounded so tired and scared. His fingers grabbed the bar. Whatever was going on outside was bigger than his need to be alone. These people had climbed dangerous mountain paths in a storm to find his cabin. They didn't come here by mistake. As he lifted the bar, Silas Ward didn't know that the next few minutes would break the quiet life he built around his sad heart. And he couldn't guess that 6 strangers would make him choose between staying alone or doing something way scarier, helping them by opening his door. The door swung open, and Silas saw 6 of the most desperate people ever. Rain was pouring down their faces, mixed with tears and tiredness. Their clothes were ripped and muddy, hanging like rags on their skinny bodies. The woman in front held a small kid tight against her chest. Both were shaking hard in the cold mountain air. Behind her were 5 others, 3 men and 2 more women, all looking like they'd been running for days. Their eyes looked past Silas into the warm light of his cabin, then back at his rough face with a mix of hope and fear. The woman with the kid stepped forward and spoke fast in Chinese, her voice cracking with feeling. She pointed to the kid, then to the others behind her, then put her hands together like she was praying. Silas didn't get her words, but he totally understood what she meant. Please help us. We're in big trouble out here. Silas looked past them into the dark, checking the trees for any signs of someone chasing them. These people were running from something bad, and whatever it was that pushed them to climb these tough mountains in a storm. His gut, sharpened by years of living alone, told him helping them might bring trouble to his door. But the kid in the woman's arms looked about 3 years old. Her lips were blue from the cold, and her eyes were closed, so tired. In this weather, they'd all die soon. "Come in," Silas said, his voice scratchy from not talking much. He moved aside and pointed into the cabin. They rushed in like water bursting through a broken dam, bringing the smell of rain and fear. The woman with the kid fell down near his fireplace, unwrapping the wet clothes to show a little girl who was barely breathing. The others huddled together, their eyes big as they looked around the simple but warm inside of Silas's hideout. One of the men, older with gray streaks in his black hair, walked up to Silas carefully, like he didn't want to scare him. He bowed low, then spoke in choppy English. "Thank you. Thank you for being kind." Silas nodded shortly and went to his shelves. He grabbed thick wool blankets, dried meat, and a can of special coffee. As he handed out the blankets, he watched these strangers turn his quiet, orderly life into something wild and full of life. Their thankful whispers filled the silence he'd gotten used to over 3 years. The woman by the fire had warned the kid, who was now crying softly, a sound that meant she was coming back to life. That sound hit Silas hard, bringing back memories he'd tried to forget for years. As he got hot food ready for his surprise guests, one thought kept growing in his mind. These people didn't find his cabin by chance. Someone had sent them here, someone who knew exactly where he lived. The older man, who thanked him, said his name was Jin Jiao, speaking slowly in the rough English he'd learned in mining camps. Through slow talking and hand signs, Silas started to understand their story. They were running from a Chinese settlement that got burned down by men who wanted the land. "The bad men came with fire," Jin said, his shaky hands holding a cup of hot coffee. "Said we don't belong. Said leave or die. We ran at night." The woman with the kid was Jin's daughter, May. Her husband stayed behind to help others escape and hadn't been seen since. The little girl, named Ling, was Jin's granddaughter. The other 3 were neighbors who ran together, with only the clothes they were wearing. As Silas listened, he got a bad feeling. These weren't just lost travelers who found his mountain. Someone had told them exactly how to find his hidden cabin. But who knew about this place? Who would send scared people to his door? "Who told you about my cabin?" Silas asked, putting down his own cup carefully. Jin's eyes looked a little guilty. He spoke fast to the others in Chinese, and Silas heard the worry in their voices. They were talking about him. "Old man. In town," Jin finally said. He said mountain man helps people. Said follow the creek to big rocks, then up where trees are thick. Said you know about running away. Silas felt like his blood froze. Only one person knew those exact directions to his cabin. Only one person knew why he'd run to these mountains 3 years ago, carrying guilt that hurt like a burn. Doc, the only man in Nofield who knew the whole truth about what happened to his family. What did this old man look like? Silas asked, his voice sharper than he meant. Before Jin could answer, a sound cut through the storm that made everyone in the cabin stop. Dogs barking, getting closer. These weren't wild animals looking for food. These were hunting dogs following a trail right to Silas's door. May pulled her daughter closer, her eyes wide with fear. The others started talking fast in Chinese, their voices getting panicky. Jin stood up, his face serious, knowing what those barking dogs meant. "They found us," he whispered. "Bad men with guns. They followed us here." Silas went to the window and looked through a gap in the shutters. Torchlights flickered between the trees below, maybe half a mile down the mountain. At least 6 men on horses, probably more behind them. They were moving slowly but surely up the steep trail, letting their dogs lead them through the dark. His mind raced through what to do. These people had brought danger to his door, but sending them out into the storm would be like killing them. The kids wouldn't last an hour in this weather. But staying meant fighting, and fighting meant showing who he was to men who might know him. 3 years of staying hidden were at risk. As the barking got louder, Silas realized Doc Patterson hadn't just sent these people to him for a safe place. The old doctor had started something that would make Silas choose between his secret life and something much scarier. The chance to do something good. Silas turned from the window and looked at the 6 scared faces watching him. The firelight showed their tiredness and fear, the reasons they'd climbed this mountain. Outside, the dogs were getting closer, their barking bouncing off the rocky hills like thunder. "Listen close," Silas said, his voice steady even though his heart was racing. "There's a root cellar behind this cabin, dug into the hill. It's hidden under a pile of firewood. You can all fit in there if you squish tight." Jin translated fast to the others. May held her daughter tighter, her eyes jumping between Silas and the door where danger was coming through the storm. "What about you?" Jin asked. Silas was already moving to his gun rack, checking his rifle and an old Colt revolver he hadn't touched in months. "I'm gonna buy you time to hide. When they get here, I'll say I haven't seen anyone. They won't believe you," Jin said, shaking his head. "Dogs follow our smell. They know we're here." "Maybe, but I've got a trick they don't expect." Silas pulled a small tin from behind a loose floorboard. Inside were papers he'd hoped never to use again. "I'm not just some mountain guy. I used to be Deputy Marshal Silas Ward before I came here to hide." The name hit Jin hard. Even in Chinese settlements, people had heard stories about Silas Ward, the lawman who took down the Brennan gang alone, who cleaned up 3 towns before disappearing. "Why'd you leave?" Jin asked quietly. Silas's jaw tightened. "Because I let down the people I was supposed to protect. My wife and daughter died because I was too slow, too dumb to see trouble coming." He pinned the marshal's badge to his shirt with slightly shaky hands. "I won't mess up again." Through the shutters, they could see torchlights dancing. Between the trees, maybe 200 yards away. The men were moving carefully, but they were coming. Silas figured maybe 10 minutes before they reached the cabin. "Go now. Get to that cellar and don't make a sound, no matter what you hear out here." Jin bowed deeply. "If we live, we'll never forget this kindness. If you live, get to Fort Collins. Tell them Deputy Marshal Ward sent you. They'll help. You go west safely." The group moved fast but quietly out the back door, disappearing into the dark like shadows. Silas watched them vanish behind his cabin, then turned to face what was coming up the mountain trail. He'd spent 3 years running from the badge he now wore on his chest. 3 years hiding from the duty that had cost him everything he loved. But as he checked his weapons one last time, Silas realized some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant showing the man he'd tried so hard to hide. The first horseman came out of the trees like a ghost from a scary story, his face lit up by the torch he carried. Behind him came 9 more riders, spread out like men who knew how to hunt people. Their leader was a tall guy with a scarred face and cold eyes that looked over Silas's cabin like he was checking out a prize. Silas stepped onto his porch, rifle held easy but ready. The badge on his chest caught the torchlight, shining like a warning. He stood where the light from his doorway would show the badge clearly. "That's far enough," Silas called out, his voice strong, like he remembered how to sound in charge. "Tell me why you're on my land." The scarred man moved his horse closer, his hand resting on his gun. "Name's Clayton Reeves. We're chasing some Chinese folks who stole stuff from their bosses. Our dogs led us right to your door." "Your dogs are wrong," Silas said. "I've been alone up here for years. Ask anyone in Millfield." Reeves smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Maybe, but you won't mind if we look around, right? Just to check." "Actually, I do mind. This is my land, and you're not welcome." One of the other riders, a younger guy who seemed nervous, leaned forward. "We got rights to chase criminals, mister. They burned a settlement and killed good people." Silas looked at their faces, seeing the lies in their eyes like words in a book. These weren't good guys looking for justice. These were men who used fear and violence to get what they wanted, pretending they had the law on their side. "Got any papers saying you're allowed to chase people?" Silas asked, his voice calm but strong. Reeves's smile got mean. "Don't need papers to deal with thieves and killers. Step aside, old man, before this gets messy." "Funny thing," Silas said, moving his rifle a little. "I do have papers. Been a marshal for 12 years, and I'm pretty sure my badge beats whatever you think you've got." The badge made the group nervous. Some guys looked at each other, knowing it was bad to mess with a federal marshal. But Reeves didn't back down, his scarred face twisting with anger. "Marshal or not, you're hiding criminals. That makes you just as guilty." "Guilty of what?" "Seems like the only crime here is 10 armed guys threatening a marshal on his own land." The standoff felt tight, like a rope about to snap. Silas could feel eyes watching from the dark, could sense the fear from the hidden cellar where 6 lives were at stake. His finger rested on the rifle's trigger, his old skills coming back after 3 years of trying to forget. "Here's the deal," Silas said, stepping forward. You all turn around and ride back down this mountain, and I'll forget you were here making threats. Otherwise, I'll have to arrest you all for scaring a federal marshal." Reeves's hand moved toward his gun, and Silas felt time slow down. The next few seconds would decide if 6 innocent people lived or died, if his 3 years of hiding were for nothing. In the flickering torchlight, Deputy Marshal Silas Ward got ready to see if he still had what it took to protect the people who needed him most. Reeves's hand stopped halfway to his gun as he realized who Silas was. "Ward," he whispered, the name heavy like a rock dropped in water. "Silas Ward. Thought you were dead. Disappointed?" Silas asked, his rifle now aimed right at Reeves's chest. The other riders got nervous. Even tough guys had heard stories about the marshal who took down the Brennan gang in a shootout that left 6 bad guys dead and saved the town of Cedar Ridge. But they'd also heard he'd disappeared 3 years ago after something awful happened to his family. "You vanished after your wife and girl died," Reeves said, his voice sly. "Heard you went nuts with sadness. Started drinking. Lost your skills. That's why you're hiding up here like a broken old man." The words hurt Silas like punches, each one meant to sting. His jaw got tight, but his hand stayed steady on his rifle. "Maybe, but a broken marshal is still a marshal. And you're still on my land." One of the younger riders couldn't hold back. "He's faking Clayton. Look at him. He's been living like a wild animal up here. Probably hasn't shot that rifle in years." Silas looked at the young guy. "Wanna bet on that, kid?" His calm, scary voice made the rider gulp and look away. But Reeves wasn't done playing dirty. "Here's what I think, Ward. Those Chinese folks found your hideout and got you to help them. Maybe they paid you. Maybe they used your guilt about failing your family. Either way, you're protecting killers. The only killers I see are the 10 guys who burned innocent people out of their homes," Silas said. "Gonna tell me that wasn't you?" Reeves's fake smile slipped for a second, showing the mean joy underneath. "Those people were on railroad land. We were just clearing them out, all legal, by burning their homes at night, whatever it took." The confession hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Silas felt the cold anger that once made him a feared lawman. These men had destroyed a whole settlement, split up families, and now were hunting the survivors like animals. "You just admitted to crimes in front of a federal marshal," Silas said quietly. "Makes this easy." Reeves knew he'd messed up too late. His hand went for his gun, but Silas was ready. The marshal's rifle fired first, the shot booming across the mountain like thunder. Reeves fell from his horse, grabbing his shoulder and yelling in pain. The other 9 riders reached for their guns, but Silas was already moving, diving behind a thick porch post as bullets flew where he'd been standing. The fight for his secret hideout had started. Gunshots exploded across the clearing like deadly fireworks, flashes lighting up the stormy night. Silas pressed against the post as bullets chipped the wood above him. His years alone hadn't made him rusty, and his old skills guided him as he shot back carefully. 2 riders were trying to sneak around to the back of the cabin where the people were hiding. Silas couldn't let them get there. He ran from cover, sprinting to a pile of firewood that gave him a better shot. A bullet zipped past his ear, so close he felt its heat. From behind the woodpile, he could aim at the sneaking riders. His rifle fired twice, and both men fell from their horses, yelling in pain, not dead, but out of the fight. "He's just one guy," Reeves shouted from where he'd crawled behind a log, still holding his hurt shoulder. "Charge him!" 3 riders kicked their horses forward in a wild rush. Silas dropped his empty rifle and pulled his Colt revolver, its familiar weight like an old friend. The first rider was almost on him when Silas shot, the bullet knocking the man off his horse. The second rider got close enough to swing a rifle at Silas's head, but the marshal ducked and shot the horse's chest. The animal fell, trapping its rider with a nasty crunch of broken bones. The third rider turned his horse to get away, but Silas aimed carefully and shot, the bullet hitting the man's shoulder and knocking him off. A sudden quiet fell over the clearing, broken only by the groans of hurt men and the nervous sounds of horses without riders. 6 of Reeves's Men were down, either dead or too hurt to keep fighting. The last three, including Reeves, were hiding behind trees and rocks. "This doesn't have to go on," Silas called out, reloading his revolver like a pro. "Drop your guns and leave. I'll let you go." "Go to hell, Ward," Reeves growled. "You think killing us will bring your family back? You think playing hero will erase your guilt?" The words were meant to mess with his head, to make him doubt. 3 years ago, they might have worked. But as Silas hid behind the woodpile, he thought of the scared faces in his cellar. Jin's thankful beau, May holding her daughter, little Ling's blue lips warming by his fire. "Maybe not," Silas said, "but it'll stop you from hurting anyone else." A rifle shot splintered the wood near his head, followed by 2 more, from different spots. They were trying to keep him stuck, while one of them moved to a better position. It was a trick men like them used, but Silas had hunted bad guys for 12 years before hiding in these mountains. He knew how to read shadows, to guess where desperate men would go. The sound of boots crunching wet leaves told him someone was sneaking. To his left, Silas grinned darkly and moved through the shadows, becoming the hunter. It was time to end this fight and see if 3 years of hiding had taken away the skills that once made him famous. Silas moved through the dark like a shadow, his feet sure on the ground he knew well, while his enemies tripped over unfamiliar land. The man trying to sneak up didn't see Silas until a cold gun pressed against his neck. "Drop your gun," Silas whispered. The rifle fell to the wet ground. Silas used the man as a shield and called out to the last 2 fighters. "It's over, Reeves. Your guys are down, and I've got your friend here with a gun to his head. Make a choice." "You won't kill an unarmed guy," Reeves called back, but he sounded unsure. 3 years ago, you'd be right," Silas said. "But I've learned good guys sometimes have to do tough things to save innocent people." His words sounded like a final warning. These men had burned homes, hunted people through storms, and threatened to kill anyone in their way. They didn't deserve mercy. "Last chance," Silas said. "Leave now, or I'll hunt you all down." A long pause. Then Reeves's voice came, beaten and bitter. "You win this time, Ward, but those Chinese folks will never be safe. There's too much money involved. That's not your problem anymore." The sound of horses running away echoed through the woods as the survivors of Reeves's gang disappeared into the night. Silas waited until the hoofbeats were gone before letting his prisoner go, sending him stumbling after his friends. Dawn was breaking over the mountain peaks when Silas finally reached the hidden cellar. He knocked softly on the secret door and called out, his voice rough from being so tired. "It's safe now. They're gone." Jin came out first, then the others. They looked at Silas with amazement and thanks, seeing his torn clothes and the blood on his hands from helping wounded enemies before they left. "You're hurt," May said, noticing him holding his left arm where a bullet had scratched him. "I'll be fine," Silas said. "But you can't stay here. They'll come back with more guys." "Where do we go?" Jin asked. Silas looked out over the valley, where the sun was turning the mountains gold, and realized his 3 years of hiding were done. He couldn't protect these people from his cabin, couldn't fight a whole railroad company from the shadows. "Fort Collins," he said, fixing his badge more firmly on his shirt. "I'll take you there myself. Make sure you get safe passage west." As they got ready for the risky trip down the mountain, Silas felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. The heavy duty he tried to escape had found him again. But this time, it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like coming home. Deputy Marshal Silas Ward was back in the world, and he had work to do. If you liked this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another awesome tale where bravery and making things right come together in the wild frontier. Don't forget to subscribe and maybe send a super chat to help us keep sharing stories like these. Your support means the world to us.